Hello there, neighbors. Just a quick mention before we jump into the episode. I've been posting a lot more short-form content on TikTok and Instagram. So if you would be so kind, stop on over to either of those platforms and check it out. It's in the same vein as the things that I talk about on the podcast. Once in a while, there's some content there that's a little bit more lighthearted and comedic than the podcast itself, but I think you'll enjoy it. And if you do, please like, follow, and comment if you would. Alrighty then, let's move on to the episode. There is a concept that I think everybody understands, whether you love sports or hate sports or only watch sports when somebody else has the remote. We all understand that the referee is not supposed to be taking calls from the rich guy in the luxury box. It's not a complicated rule. It's playground level morality, recess justice. It's the kind of thing that a 7-year-old understands before they can even spell words like conflict of interest. If one team gets to call the person in charge and say, hey, could you maybe take another look at that penalty? And then the penalty suddenly goes away. Everybody knows what that looks like. And that is why we're talking about this in this episode. Not because every person listening to this podcast needs to suddenly care about soccer. You don't need to know formations. You don't need to know FIFA procedure. You don't need to pretend that you've always had strong feelings about the offside rule. Honestly, some of us still are suspicious that the offside rule was written by a committee of sleep-deprived lawyers, but I digress. What you do need to care about is power. You need to care about rules. You need to care about what happens when the President of the United States reportedly gets involved in a disciplinary decision affecting the U.S. team at a World Cup being hosted, in part, by the United States. Because that's not just sports. That is a very familiar political instinct. Just happens to wear cleats this time. Fuller and Balogun, one of the U.S. team's top players, received a red card in the knockout round against Bosnia and Herzegovina. And let me just say this right here, how much easier this recording would have been if it had been Matt Turner who had gotten that card. But anyway, that normally meant an automatic one-match suspension, which would have kept him out of the next game against Belgium. Then Donald Trump contacted FIFA, specifically FIFA President Gianni Infantino, and asked for the decision to be reviewed. FIFA later suspended the ban for a 1-year probationary period, while keeping the red card itself on the record. Belgium, of course, objected. The UEFA blasted the decision. FIFA said the disciplinary process was independent. And then Belgium beat the U.S. 4-1 anyway, because apparently irony showed up to the stadium. But the score isn't really the story. The real story is that the World Cup gave Trump something most politicians would dream of: a clean, patriotic win. Stadiums full, cameras everywhere, flags everywhere, the world watching the U.S. team giving people something to cheer for. And Trump had the win already. And somehow he still managed to screw it up. Greetings, neighbors. Happy Wednesday, and welcome to Your Neighbor on the Left podcast, where we talk about progressive politics, human decency, and life on the blue side of America's ideological divide. My name is Don Spielis, and I am your host. And today, we're going to be talking about Trump, FIFA, the World Cup, and what happens when a man who treats rules like packing material gets close enough to the referee booth. And I want to be clear right up front, this is not an episode for soccer fans. I'm not particularly a soccer fan, but I mean, if you are a soccer fan, that's great. If you are not, you're still fully qualified to understand the problem here, because the problem isn't complicated. The problem isn't whether a red card in the particular situation was harsh. The problem is not whether the U.S. team needed Balogun on the field. The problem is that sports, like democracy, depends on people believing the rules still apply when powerful people do not like the outcome. And Trump keeps showing us that he does not want neutral rules. He wants the referee to know who called. So let's start with what actually happened, because the details matter here, and they matter precisely because this is the kind of story where people will try to muddy the water. Fuller and Balogun is a forward for the United States men's national team. He is one of the players the U.S. would obviously want available in a knockout match. In the World Cup match against Bosnia and Herzegovina, he received a red card. So, in plain English, a red card means that you were kicked out of the game, and it's supposed to carry an automatic suspension for the following game. That next game was against Belgium. So, under the normal expectation, Balogun would not play. And that's where the story stops being a sports story and starts being something else entirely. According to Reuters, Donald Trump asked FIFA President Gianni Infantino to review the red card. FIFA then suspended the automatic one-match ban in favor of a 1-year probationary period. And that is a very important phrase. The red card itself wasn't erased. FIFA did not say that the foul did not happen. What changed was the consequence. The suspension that would have kept Balogun out against Belgium was put on ice, basically parked for a year, unless there was another violation, which then allowed him to play. Now, FIFA has said that its disciplinary bodies acted independently. And that matters, and it should be said clearly. I'm not saying we have a signed memo that says, "Dear FIFA, please do presidential favor number 47. That's not the claim. But Belgium challenged Balogun's eligibility. FIFA rejected that challenge. The UEFA criticized the decision in extremely blunt terms, calling it unprecedented, incomprehensible, and unjustifiable. And then Belgium beat the United States 4-1. So to be precise, the confirmed public issue is not that anyone has proved in a courtroom that Donald Trump illegally forced FIFA to do something. That's not where the evidence is. The issue is that the president of the host country reportedly contacts the head of the global governing body about a disciplinary decision involving that host country's own team, and then the decision changes in a way that benefits the host country's team. And that is a credibility problem sprinting. And if your response is, well, FIFA says the process was independent, okay, fine, put that on the record. But public trust does not work like a receipt from a gas station. You can just wave a piece of paper that says independent process and expect everyone to ignore the fact that the most powerful politician in the host country made a call and got the results that he wanted. Because this is where regular people, even people who don't care about soccer, will immediately understand the issue. If your kid is playing in a tournament and another parent calls the league director and suddenly a suspension disappears before the next game, you're not going to say, well, I'm sure the internal review committee's process was fully insulated from undue influence. Of course not. You're going to say, come on, what are we doing here? And that basically is the whole story. Come on, what are we doing here? And this is the part that really gets me. Trump did not need this. That's what makes this whole thing so revealing and ridiculous. This was not some desperate political situation where he had no other way to benefit. The World Cup coming to the United States was already a big win, a big, loud, television-ready, flag-covered gift with corporate sponsors and camera angles. A competent president could have used this in the easiest way imaginable. You welcome the world, you praise the players, you talk about American cities on display, you talk about visitors filling hotels and restaurants and bars and airports and train stations and stadiums. You talk about families watching together, about the country hosting one of the biggest sporting events on the planet. You talk about pride without making it weird. You smile near the trophy and let the photographers do the rest. That's it. That's the entire assignment right there. No secret strategy room needed. No 20-dimensional chess. No, sir, the electoral implications of midfield possession in the 63rd minute are very interesting. Just stand there and take the easy win. And it was really a win-win for him. If the tournament went well, he could claim the glow. If the stadiums were packed, he could say the world wanted to come here. If the host cities looked good, he could talk about American greatness. The U.S. team made a run. He could wrap himself around that story so tightly someone would have to cut him loose with garden shears. And honestly, even a lot of people who cannot stand him would have had a hard time turning that into a partisan fight. Because what are you going to say? Actually, I oppose people watching the World Cup match in Kansas City. I'm against restaurants making money during a global event. I reject the concept of fans wearing jerseys in public. No, a seasoned politician understands when the moment is broad enough to simply just let it breathe. But Trump could not leave it alone. He had the cameras, he had the crowds, he had the flags, he had the global attention, he had the trophy nearby, which, let's be honest, is exactly the kind of shiny object that activates every emergency light in his brain. He had everything he needed to turn this into a clean, patriotic moment. And then he reached for the phone. And that is the rot at the center of this story. The scandal is not that Trump wanted America to win. Lots of people wanted America to win. I wanted America to win. Rooting for your country in the World Cup is normal. That's not the problem. The problem is that Trump apparently could not imagine benefiting from the moment without trying to bend the rules. He did not need to cheat or even appear to cheat to benefit from the World Cup. That's what makes this so incredible, so revealing. He already had the win. He just could not leave the referee alone. And once he did that, then the story changed. It stopped being the United States is hosting the world, and it stopped being the U.S. team is making a run, and look at this huge global event happening on American soil. And instead it became, did the president use his relationship with FIFA to help the U.S. team? And I mean, that's a lot of things. It's not patriotism. That's taking national pride and dragging it into the little back room where favors happen. Now, the relationship with FIFA matters in this story, and I want to handle this carefully because this is where people love to pretend the only two options are nothing to see here or secret international crime syndicate with matching jackets. And we don't need either of those. We don't need to prove a secret handshake to recognize a public problem. Donald Trump and Gianni Infantino have had a very visible relationship. Infantino has appeared with Trump. Trump has praised him. FIFA has had obvious reasons to maintain a good relationship with the president of a country hosting World Cup games. That does not automatically mean every decision is corrupt, but it does mean that when something like this happens, the appearance of influence, it isn't some wild conspiracy theory. It's the obvious question. Because when the president of the host country has a friendly public relationship with the head of the organization running the tournament, and then the president reportedly asked that person to review a disciplinary decision involving the host country's team, and then the punishment is suspended in a way that helps that team, people are going to ask what happened. That's not hysteria. That's what accountability sounds like when it still has a pulse. And FIFA can say the disciplinary bodies acted independently, and Trump can say he did not personally decide anything. Everyone can stand at separate microphones and explain that the proper procedures were followed. The appropriate review was done, and the machinery operated exactly as designed. Fine. But independence is not just a policy, it's a public trust. And public trust is fragile and not protected by official statements alone. It's protected by distance and restraint, by the powerful person not making the call in the first place. That's the part that Trump never seems to understand, or maybe he understands it perfectly and just doesn't give a damn. There are some things a president should not touch precisely because his touch changes the meaning of the thing. And if the president calls a prosecutor about an investigation, that matters. If the president calls an election official about votes, that matters. If the president calls the head of a sports governing body, one that gave him a made-up peace prize, if he calls them about a disciplinary issue involving the national team during a World Cup hosted on American soil, that matters too. And it's not because soccer is, the equivalent of democracy, but because the instinct is the same. The president should not be the appeals process. And the bigger the office, the more careful the person in that office is supposed to be. Because power doesn't have to shout to be heard. Sometimes power just clears its throat and everyone in the room starts rearranging the furniture. That is why this doesn't require a cartoon villain plot. We don't need a smoke-filled room. We don't need a bag full of money with a dollar sign on it. We don't need Infantino dramatically whispering, "For you, Mr. President, I shall bend the sacred red card." The problem is simpler than that. Trump got close enough to the whistle that nobody can pretend that the whistle sounds clean anymore. So, why should anyone care? I guess that's a fair question, because if you're not a soccer person, this can sound unimportant at first. A red card, a suspension, a player eligibility issue, a governing body with a name that sounds like it should be printed on a knockoff video game controller. But sports integrity matters because sports are one of the simplest places where people understand fairness. The rules are the product. That's what makes sports work. Not because every call is perfect, not because referees are flawless, not because governing bodies are pure little snow globes of ethical perfection. Come on. Anyone who has watched a game for more than 6 minutes knows that bad calls happen. Human beings miss things. Officials get angles wrong, review systems fail, and fans yell at television like the television has, subpoena power. All of that is normal. And sports can survive bad calls. They cannot survive the belief that the host country's president gets a private lane to the referee's office. That's a big difference. A bad call is human failure. A political call is institutional failure. And institutional failure is much more dangerous because it doesn't just affect one moment, it affects everything around it. Once people believe that the process can be shaped by power, every decision then starts to look suspicious. Every reversal becomes suspect. Punishments become negotiable. Every win has an asterisk that nobody asked for. That is what Trump introduced here. Not just one player back on the field. Suspicion. And suspicion is sticky. It does not leave the room politely after the final whistle. It hangs around. It gets into the walls. It changes how people see the next decision and the next one and the next one and so on. That is why neutral systems need distance from powerful people, not because powerful people are never allowed to have opinions. Trump can want the U.S. to win. He can cheer. He can, wear a scarf. He can do the awkward thumbs up photo with the team where every player looks like they just realized the elevator they're on is stuck. Fine. Root for the team, but the president should not be anywhere near the disciplinary machine. Because the game only works if the whistle is bigger than the most powerful person in the luxury box. That's the entire idea. And again, this is not complicated. You don't need a rule book the size of a cinder block to understand it. If the mayor calls the Little League commissioner because his nephew got suspended, that is a problem. If the governor calls the state athletic board because his favorite college team got punished, that is a problem. If the president calls FIFA because the U.S. team is about to lose a key player, that is a problem. Even if the decision might have been reconsidered anyway, even if the red card was questionable, even if there is some technical rule that allows a suspension to be delayed or converted or parked in the legal garage for a year, the process still has to look independent. Because fairness isn't only about what happened in the room, it's also about whether people can trust that the room had no backdoor for a powerful person. And this is where the story gets bigger than the World Cup, because Trump's problem has never been that he wants to win. Everybody in politics wants to win. Every candidate wants to win. Every party, every campaign is built around winning. There's nothing strange about that. The strange part is that Trump does not seem to recognize any neutral system as legitimate unless it helps him win. That's the pattern. And it's a pattern that everyone is aware of. Courts are fair when they rule for him. When they rule against him, they're corrupt. Elections are secure when he wins. When he loses, they're rigged. Investigations are legitimate when they target his enemies. When they target him, they're witch hunts. Journalists are honest when they praise him and they ask him softball questions. If they ask real questions, if they critique him, then they're enemies. It's always the same move. The institution is legitimate only if the institution serves him. Now, apparently, that instinct has made its way to the soccer field, which is maybe the most on-brand absurdity imaginable. Because, of course, the man who tried to pressure election officials now sees a red card and thinks, has anyone called the manager? That's the thing about Trumpism. It does not stop at politics because it does not understand politics as a limited arena. It understands power as the right to do anything. A court, a news organization, a federal agency, a university, a private company, a state government, a sports governing body, doesn't matter. If the outcome is inconvenient, the system must be pressured, attacked, delegitimized. And the scariest part is that his supporters have been trained to see this not as corruption, but as strength. He's fighting for us. He's pushing back. He's making the call. He's getting things done. But getting things done is not automatically good. That, I think, is the biggest misconception that we have in today's MAGA movement. A burglar gets things done. Guy cutting the line at the pharmacy gets things done. A mob boss gets things done. The question is not whether power can produce an outcome. Of course it can. That is why we have rules around power in the first place. The question is whether the outcome came through a process that people can trust. And Trumpism just cannot accept that question. In Trump's worldview, there are no neutral systems. There are only systems controlled by him, systems controlled by his enemies, and systems waiting to be pressured. That's why every referee becomes suspicious, not just in sports, in everything. In elections, the court referees, the congressional referees, the media referees, the inspectors general, career civil servants, scientists, they if they call the play his way, they are brave and fair and possibly the greatest official in the history of officiating. If they call against him, well, then they're crooked and biased and paid off and communist and woke and globalist and part of the deep state or whatever, whatever label gets pulled that morning. The referee is not supposed to be red or blue. The referee is supposed to be annoying in both directions. That's how you know the thing still works. But Trump does not want a system that works. He wants a system that answers to him. And then there's, the international embarrassment of it all, because the World Cup is not just some domestic level event where the usual American politics and the circus with it can stomp around in big shoes and pretend nobody else can see it. The whole point of the World Cup is that the world is watching. The host country is on display. The stadiums are on display, the cities, the airports, the security, the crowds, the broadcast, the hospitality, the whole national performance is on display. And then what did Trump inject into that? The suspicion that the president of the host country leaned on FIFA to help the host country's team. I mean, that's not America first. That's America looking ridiculous, like it needed a favor. And I know how his supporters are framing it. They're saying he was fighting for the team. They're saying he was standing up for America. They're saying this is what strong leaders do. They're saying, finally, somebody who makes the call. But there's nothing strong about getting special treatment. That's not strength. Strength is competing without needing the system tilted towards you. Strength is letting your players win or lose on the field and having enough confidence in them and in your country not to turn every setback into a phone call. This was not strength. This was insecurity. And the sad part is that it made the U.S. team look smaller, not bigger. It did not elevate them. It did not protect them. It didn't showcase their talent. Didn't make the world respect them more. It made them part of another Trump story. Imagine what would have happened if they had won that next game. All of the talk would have centered around the fact that there was a player who might only be there because of a phone call from Trump. And this is what he does to everything he touches. Everything becomes about him. A global tournament becomes about his relationship with FIFA. The knockout run that the U.S. team was on becomes about whether he got a suspension delayed. A moment that could have been about players and fans and cities and the world showing up here becomes another exhausting entry in the endless ledger of what did Trump do now? It's not patriotism, it's theft. I mean, not in the legal sense. I'm not saying he stole property. I'm saying he stole the moment. He took something that belonged to the players and the fans and the host cities and the country, the sport itself, and he dragged it into his own mud. And the rest of the world sees that. They don't need a seminar in American institutions to understand what it looks like when a powerful leader seems to get a special lane. They have seen that story before. Many countries have lived that story. They know exactly what it smells like when power starts leaning towards the whistle. And that's why this matters beyond one game. The World Cup was supposed to be a showcase for the country, and Trump turned it into a showcase for the way he thinks power is supposed to work. And I want to spend a minute on the players because I think they deserve much better than this. The U.S. team did not create this controversy. The players did not ask to become a case study in political influence, or they didn't need their tournament turned into a civics lesson. They had enough pressure already. They were playing knockout soccer in a World Cup being hosted on American soil, and that is already a pressure cooker. That is already an emotional blender that they're working in at their highest level. And then Trump made it about Trump. I mean, how can you call that anything but unfair? The players deserve to have their tournament judged by their feet and their tactics and their nerves and their mistakes and their effort and yes, their results. That's how sports is supposed to work. You win, you lose, you get praised, you get criticized, you live with it, and you do it in a way so that you can be proud of it. But once Trump got involved, the team was dragged into a legitimacy problem that it did not need or deserve. If the U.S. had beaten Belgium with Balogun on the field, that would have been the entire story. It would not have been clean. It would not have simply been the U.S. advances. It would have been the U.S. wins after Trump helped, get a player cleared to play. Every goal, every run, every moment would have carried the smell of that move. Fair or not, that's how it would have landed. And because they lost, it became humiliating in a different way. Because now the story is Trump reportedly intervened, FIFA suspended the ban, Belgium objected, the UEFA criticized the decision, Balogun played, and Belgium still beat the United States 4-1. And that's worse than losing. That's losing after someone made the whole room stare at the rule book. So either way, the team was stuck. Win and the win gets questioned, lose and the intervention becomes a punchline. It's the epitome of a no-win situation, and Trump created it. And I want to be clear about something else. This is not about whether Balogun is a good player. He is. This is not about whether the U.S. team had earned its place in that match. They certainly had. It's not about whether fans were wrong to want the best players available. Of course, they were not. Everyone wants that. Fans want their team at full strength. Coaches want their team at full strength. Players want their teammates available. All of that is normal sports emotion. But normal sports emotion is not supposed to travel through the president. A fan can yell at the television, a coach can file an appeal, a federation can follow the proper process, a player can make his case. That's the system. But the president of the host country should not become the emergency appeals hotline. Because when he does, he doesn't just affect the punishment. He affects the meaning of the game and everything around it. He changes what people think they are watching. And that's the theft inside the theft. He did not just steal the moment from the country. He stole a cleaner story from the players. They deserved a tournament where their work spoke louder than their president. And that brings us back to the part that I just can't get past. He could have taken the win. Not the soccer win, obviously. That didn't end up happening. Belgium handled that part, handily. I mean, the political win, the public relations win, the national stage win. Trump was handed one of the easiest political gifts imaginable. A World Cup on American soil, massive crowds, global attention, American cities full of visitors, fans waving flags, people who don't normally care about soccer suddenly learning players' names and yelling things at televisions, even if they only half understand. A national team giving the country a reason to gather around something that was not a trial or a tariff argument or a scandal or a shutdown or, another deranged social media post fired into the sky at 3:00 in the morning. That was a gift. A normal president would have known what to do. Somebody with a modicum of political instinct. You say nice things, you smile, you wave, you praise the players, you thank the host cities, you welcome the world, you talk about, how great America is and what it can still do when it opens its doors instead of building its entire personality around slamming them. It's not hard. But Trump was handed a golden political gift and still managed to screw it up. And that's the sickness of it. Clean wins don't satisfy him. A clean win only gives him the benefit. It does not prove the domination. It doesn't prove that somebody bent for him. It doesn't prove that the rules moved because he walked into the room. And with Trump, that always seems to be the point. He does not just want the trophy, although he freaking loves trophies. He wants fingerprints on the process. He doesn't just want applause. He wants obedience. He doesn't just want a country to have a good moment. He wants the moment to pass through him first. Like he's the toll booth on the road to national pride. And that's why this matters. It shows once again his instinct in purest form. There was absolutely no need. Nobody forced him to get involved. Nobody needed the president to become the red card whisperer. The country had enough problems that could have used presidential attention, sort of. Housing costs, health care, food prices, climate disasters, political violence, public schools, infrastructure. I mean, pick a drawer. This is what got a phone call. A soccer suspension. And not because it was the most important issue in the country, but because it was a place where the rule stood between Trump and the outcome he wanted. That's the pattern. Find a rule, pressure the rule, question the rule, attack the rule, bend the rule, and then say, look how strong I am. But it's not strength. It's quite the opposite. A strong leader can let the game be played. A strong leader can accept that not every institution exists to serve him. He can stand near a great national moment without sticking his hand into the machinery. A strong leader can do all that. Trump can't. He had a clean win available, and he made it suspicious. So no, this is not really about a red card. It's not really about whether Fuller and Balogun should have played against Belgium. It's not whether FIFA had some technical authority to suspend the ban. It's not really about whether the U.S. would have had a better chance with him on the field or not. This is about what power does when nobody tells it not to. And Trump has spent his public life showing us exactly what he thinks rules are good for. They're good for other people. They're good for opponents. But, they're good for the weak, the inconvenient, the insufficiently loyal. But when the rule gets in his way, suddenly the rule needs a review. The official needs pressure. The process needs a phone call. The outcome needs another look. That is not leadership. That is not patriotism. That is not strength. That's just a man who just can't keep his nose out of everything. And the reason this matters is because democracy, much like sports, depends on losing being possible. It depends on the idea that the rules still count when they hurt your side. It depends on people accepting that courts can rule against them, that elections can disappoint them, investigations can find things they don't like, and officials can make calls that they don't enjoy. That is the entire bargain in democracy. You don't get democracy only when you win. You don't get fair play only when the call goes your way. You don't get to call yourself strong because you found a back door. The World Cup should have been simple. Let the players play, let the fans cheer, let the country host. Let the team win or lose on the field. Let the moment belong to something bigger than Donald Trump for 5 freaking minutes. But he couldn't do that. He had to touch it. He had to bend it towards himself. He had to turn a clean national moment into another farce, another question about pressure and influence and whether people in charge are actually in charge. Some people want to win. Some people want to compete. Some people want to govern. Donald Trump just wants the referee to know who called. That's why the story is bigger than soccer, because if they cannot accept a red card, why would we ever expect him to accept a subpoena, a court ruling, an election result, or a peaceful transfer of power? Thank you, everybody, for taking the time to download and listen to this episode of Your Neighbor on the Left. I would love to hear your thoughts on this. Is it as big of a deal as it seems to me? Is it something else? I want to know what you think. Go to the website, neighborontheleft.com. Go to the contact section. Shoot me a DM through social media or an email with the email address that's listed there. Let me know what's on your mind. While you're there, check out the episodes page. You can download or stream any episode of the podcast. And go to the blog section. I make a post for every episode of the podcast, and the post includes all of the sources that I use. I'll be back on Friday with an installment of Back Porch Files, so between now and then, stay engaged, stay kind, and have the kind of week you'd wish for others.